Hey, I'm Dan, and today I'm going to be talking to you about my experience with free screens. This includes both productivity and gaming. Now, just before we start, I'd like to point out that my opinion is my own opinion. This does not conclude the almighty argument of if it's worth it, it's just how I feel, and hopefully it might be able to help you impact your decision on whether you should get free screens or something else, like just two, just one, or even an ultra wide. Now, to start off, let's talk with what I'm rocking. I've got three BenQ RH bloody blah monitors. I can get to I should be more prepared. RL2455HM gaming monitors. However, this would still not be my choice. Although these are great for gaming with 1 millisecond response time, 1080p, blah, they are still not ideal for surround gaming. Now that being these bezels. Now, although they don't add a whole lot to a gaming experience, when you have three screens and you're rocking a game, having two black bars is quite a distraction. So maybe something like the Dell monitors, I'll get the number for those as well, the Dell S2415H, they would be a lot better, although they're a lot more expensive and still only 1080p. If I had a much bigger budget, I'd love to have something with G-Sync or 144Hz or even 4K. Now, there are many different factors that made me decide to get free screens, the two main ones being gaming and productivity. This is why most people get free screens, that and the bragging rights. Now, as far as gaming goes, I have loved it. Playing games on Surround is just a really great experience, and it's quite hard to describe without you being here to see it. However, there are still some drawbacks to this. Performance, you can take a pretty steady hit from going from one screen to three screens. Far Cry 4, for example, I can run on one screen on Ultra and get around 74 FPS with my GTX 970. However, on three screens, I struggle to hit above 30. So, you kind of have to make a decision sometimes with a rocking not quite as powerful PC as you need. Do you play with lower settings on three screens, or higher settings with only one screen? Unless frame rate isn't an issue to you, in which case just cap it at 30 and get along with it. Now, as far as productivity goes, I have loved it. I do a lot of college work. I am a college student, I study IT, and having three screens is, I can never go back. Having work open on two screens and then something else on the other, be it YouTube, Spotify, Steam, anything. Being able to have a whole window dedicated to one program is just bliss. Don't bother having to slap things to the side, and likewise. However, there are still a few little quirks with Nvidia Surround. When you full screen a Adobe product like Photoshop or Illustrator, doesn't quite work, and there should be a video demonstration now of what happens. There are also issues with Word, where the taskbar has some issues, and a few other little quirks, which for me specific, when I full screen a window, it doesn't actually quite full screen. There's about 3 or 4 pixels around the edge. I've contacted Nvidia about this, and as far as I'm aware, it's not a common product issue. It's just something that I have got. They said they'd email me back, but I'm yet to hear. Anyway, moving on swiftly. I have loved it. I could not go back to just one screen. Two screens at a push, but three screens is just a blessing. I normally have two screens for work and one for Spotify or Steam, like I said, or even TeamSpeak. Being in a game we have one screen on and having TeamSpeak on the other is amazing. However, obviously you have to sacrifice the surround. Now, I have gone through the liberty of writing a script, okay? I'm going to try my best to stick to it, so ignore the paper. First off, let's talk about the cons of why maybe free screens isn't such a good idea. They're expensive. Buying free screens, it's expensive. Buying a computer that can run it, it's expensive. These cost me around £133 at the time of purchase. That's around $201 for those living out there. Times that by 3 and it gets a lot more expensive. I could have got a much better single monitor or even an ultra wide now that they're making more of an appearance. Next up on my list is they take up a lot of room. I'm not sure if you can see here, I've actually got 2 desks and they're still barely fit on here, even with the monitor stands that I'm using. You need to have a lot of space to be rocking free screens, especially if you're going with 27-inch or larger. Next, support. There are still quite a few games that lack support for free screens. GTA and Far Cry 4, they run fine. Division, the new beta, that ran fine. If you want to play CSGO, for example, you're going to have some pretty weird HUD issues. Black Ops 3 on POM release, that also had some issues. There are many games that still have a lot of issues running free screens, although there are more now that do have support. Rocket League, GT, I could list those for hours, but there are many that just don't simply. Shadows and Mordor, no, can't have it. It's just not an option. Finally, it's hard to run. I mean, I got an i7-4790K, an MSI 970, and I still struggle to hit games on Ultra. This is not a cheap computer. This cost me around £1,500. I don't know what that is in dollars, I'm afraid. But that is quite a lot to be spending and still not being able to hit the max performance. I will hopefully be upgrading to another 970 in there, and I will get back to you on how that works. However, that is not all bad. There are still definitely some positives about free screens, otherwise I wouldn't have it. And yet again, I have another list to help us out with that one. First of all, it's productive. Like I mentioned before, free screens for work is amazing. I would never go back to even one screen, 2 screens at a push. Gaming is the main reason I personally got free screens. When you see a game running on all 3, it's just a dumber experience. Granted, it doesn't add a lot to the game. A lot of people just take it as a distraction. I personally definitely love it. However, I still choose being able to play at 60 frames as opposed to 30 on free screens, purely because I'm that much of a PC mouse race. Finally, it's easy to use. Having free screens isn't as hard as you maybe think. It's quite simple to set up. You just right click on the desktop, Nvidia control panel, check the display orders with your numbers, make sure your bezel alignment's all okay, and that's it. Done. You launch your game, select the resolution, free screens. Done. The only issue is when you want to keep swapping between with and without Nvidia Surround. That isn't as easy as I maybe think it should be, and definitely could do with some tweaking. Next up, and last on the positive list, it just looks badass. I mean, look at it. Whenever a friend comes around and sees free screens on your desk, or a game running in free screens, they are bound to be impressed. It's kind of shallow, but it's true. Finally, my experience. Now, I read quite a lot about this bit, it's from here onwards, but I don't exactly want to just be reading off here, so I'm going to try and summarize as best as I can. Okay, I've had free screens for just over a year and a half. I've definitely had enough time to test them and come back with my honest answer about my opinion on them. There are many things I personally like, and personally dislike about it. One of the main issues being, when I full screen a window, it doesn't full screen. There should hopefully be a video on that demonstrating it right now, but I've contacted Nvidia, I've emailed them, and they said they'd email me back with a response. They haven't. On the online support, they just told me to change drivers. That did nothing. I don't know. As far as I can tell, I've researched into it and no one else is having this issue and it's just me. So if anyone is having this issue, please tell me and hopefully you have a fix. Next up, YouTube. I watch a lot of YouTube and full screening a video with Nvidia Surround on puts it on all 3 screens. Granted, these 2 are black and the video's only in the middle, it's still a pain. And I cannot be bothered to disable Nvidia Surround just to watch a YouTube video. Also, if you watch movies, it also spans across 3 screens, and due to the aspect ratio of the movie, you get about 1.5 inches on the left and right screen with the bezels in the middle, which can definitely ruin the look of a film. Next up, like I said, productivity. I can never go back. I've mentioned that so many times through this video, and it is key. I'm going to keep mentioning it, because that is something I didn't actually think I'd like a lot. It was more of an argument to my parents to persuade them that free screens was a good idea. But honestly, having multiple displays, like I said, is a godsend. Next up, the gaming. This is a tricky one. I play a lot of games on Steam. Okay, Steam, everyone plays PC games on Steam. And certain games I'll play on free screens, certain games I won't, and this entirely depends normally on how hard that game is to run. If the game is super hard to run and it's not well optimized, especially not for free screens, I'll just put it on 1, and it's quite a simple process. You just select 1920 by 1080, 1 screen. However, if the game is fairly easy to run, or it's well optimized enough and the free screens doesn't break it, then I will definitely run it on 3 as if I can get the settings I want and the frame rate I want. For example, CSGO is a tricky one. It's the game I play most on Steam and have the most hours in, and I can't quite decide on whether free screens is good for it. A lot of people say it's distracting and overwhelming and can kind of get away from the focus, but frame rate definitely an issue, neither is settings. So it's kind of tricky. I've played it for several months with and without, and I haven't really noticed a difference. I don't know. I wish I could play it in windowed so I can still use the other screens, but the mouse lag just means it's a no-go. For other games, Far Cry 4, sadly, I still play on one screen. I'd love to play it on 3, and I have, but I don't like the low settings. I am a graphics whore, and I need the 60 frames per second. However, 3 screens on that game looks beautiful, and I'd love to run it on that. Next up, my personal experience, as I mentioned previously, the bezels. At the time of purchase, I was like, these are good. They had gaming monitors. They will be good for what I want. They have the settings I want. And they're quite a good price. I didn't take into account how much the bezels would annoy me. Bear in mind, when you're in a game, you don't notice it too much, but it can definitely ruin the experience ever so slightly. Plus, it just doesn't look as cool. And isn't that one of the main reasons I got this? I mean, come on. Speaking of the monitors, I forgot about this. Dead pixels. Now, this is nothing against BenQ or Amazon, but when I ordered 3 of these monitors, each of them had a single dead pixel. 2 red ones, 1 green. The stuck pixels, not dead pixels. However, I managed to get rid of 2 of them. There was one on the screen, one, obviously all 3. I got rid of the 2 on these, although that one still comes back occasionally. I have to poke it and it disappears. This one, I'm assuming you can't see, so there should be a video for it, still there. And the only way to get rid of it, if I put a lot of pressure on the bezel, which I'm just not comfortable doing, and there's no way to leave it in that way. I genuinely forget about it quite often, but it's an annoying process. I contacted both Amazon and the supplier, and they said they can only return it if it had 5 dead pixels or more on each monitor. And that's quite a common practice for a lot of monitors, even the higher end ones. The new Asus Swift one, you can't return unless it has more than 5 dead pixels. Bearing in mind the price range, that's not good enough. Back to Surround. There are still a lot of issues with Surround. The full screen on Windows, trying to watch a YouTube video or a movie, and the way you switch between the two. There's a shortcut for it. You can press 3 keys and it turns it off. 3 screens again. 3 keys, doesn't turn it back on. And when you do turn it off, it's only on one screen. Why? And it's a really painful process to put the other 2 back on. It's just not worth it. So normally I just make do with the bezels in the middle of my phone. In conclusion, now, I want to talk about my experience. This has all been my subjective opinion. You may have a totally different opinion. Some of the factors I mentioned might not even matter to you. So please, when I say my conclusion on whether 3 screens is worth it, don't go, oh, he's wrong or he's right. It's my opinion to help you make your own opinion. Now, I love 3 screens, and I would not go back. The only thing that would tempt me is an ultra-wide. They look freaking badass. The lack of bezels, the way they look, curves, they are honestly quite a good option. However, they still aren't 3 separate screens. I still can't just full screen a window and have it full scale with not having to crop out any of the options on Word, for example. It's just not the same. Also, that not quite as much screen real estate. But for gaming and productivity, an ultra-wide is definitely a worthwhile option. For gaming, I love it. And I wish I could play all games on 3 screens. I just do. My friends, they appreciate it, but they don't think it's worth it. And I can see that. It's expensive to try and run games on 3 screens. But I like it. Productivity, I don't think I need to talk about this anymore. Productivity is amazing on these screens. If they were 1440p, oh my, that's a lot of screen real estate. And for productivity is amazing. For gaming, that's a challenge. A serious challenge to run a game on 3 screens at 1440p, especially if you want them at 100 Hz to take full advantage of most 1440p screens. That's hard. The general conclusion. There isn't a lot in it. The pros and the cons pretty much weigh each other out. There's no definite, yes, you should get it, no, you shouldn't. You need to look at the factors that I've mentioned today and see if they apply to you. So, like I said, some of the pros I mentioned might not apply, some of the cons I mentioned might not apply. You might not care if a movie slightly stretches across, or if a window can't full screen, or if you can't run your games at a higher refresh rate. That might not matter to you. To some, it might be a deal breaker. So in conclusion, it's up to you. I love it and I wouldn't go back. Let me know down below what you think. Any of you rocking free screens? Tell me if you like it. Any of you thinking about getting it? Tell me why you wouldn't want to. And finally, if anyone is having the same issue with not being able to full screen a window, please let me know if you found a solution. I am begging you. Please. Anyway, this is my first video, so sorry if it's a bit shaky. Feel free to like and subscribe, it would genuinely help me out a lot with a new channel. And I'll see you in the next one.